Hello all and welcome to my channel. I'm Daniel and today I have an absolutely exciting episode for you. Today we're going to be talking about the difference between sentience and consciousness. The difference between sentience and consciousness is not a discussion that really pops up very often. In fact, I only ever heard about this discussion today. In fact, I was reading The Problem of Pain by C.S. Lewis whenever the differentiation between sentience and consciousness came up because C.S. Lewis was explaining the matter in order to prove a point within an argument. So today, in today's very exciting episode, we're going to be talking about the difference between sentience and consciousness, how exactly this difference came up within the book, and why it's important to understand the difference. So I hope that you guys are ready and excited. I hope that you guys have a pen and notebook ready to take some notes. Let's get rolling on in today's episode. Okay, so I'm sure that I know what you're thinking, just like I was thinking. Why does it matter to understand the difference between sentience and consciousness? Why click on this video if you weren't slightly curious? So while reading through the book, The Problem of Pain, a book where C.S. Lewis argues against the question, how can a good God allow so much pain in the world? There's a chapter specifically designated to animal pain. There were a ton of points to be made about animal suffering and how it's possibly justified, but C.S. Lewis came across this one argument that has been made in the past, and he completely disagreed with it. The argument was that animal suffering and pain is possibly justified because animals could just go to heaven and all of their happiness in eternity will make up for their present suffering. And having thought about it, C.S. Lewis could not get on board with this discussion. And this is where the difference between sentience and consciousness comes in. C.S. Lewis says that happiness in heaven couldn't possibly make up for animal suffering on earth because animals don't have consciousness. The higher animals, in fact, only have sentience. And that's where he starts to get into the difference between sentience and consciousness. First, he starts to talk about lower life forms, plants, earthworms, oysters, animals, living creatures that you know really don't have similar nervous systems to us. They're not thinking and processing thoughts the same way. An earthworm doesn't wake up in the morning and think, what do I have to do today? What's on my list of things to do? These lower life forms are simply responding to stimuli. If stimulus A happens, response B happens, and there's no more complexity beyond that. But then we can talk about the higher life forms, which you can, just by looking into their eyes, and we can study their nervous systems and see that they respond very similarly to ours, and you just know that there's something more going on. Whenever you're playing with a dog, you can tell that there's something much more complex about the way that a dog behaves than an earthworm behaves. Whenever you're studying a chimpanzee, you can tell that their behavior is much more complex than an earthworm's. But then C.S. Lewis has to draw a line between these higher life forms and humans by explaining the difference between sentience and consciousness. And this was all for C.S. Lewis to prove the point that the suffering that animals endure here on earth couldn't possibly be made up for or justified by eternal happiness in heaven. So now that we've gotten a little bit into the context of the discussion, I'm going to dive right into getting to the thick of it between the difference between sentience and consciousness. So for you to be able to see what C.S. Lewis was saying, I'm just going to read this little blurb right out of the book so you can see what his point was, and then I'm going to give it to you in layman's terms. Suppose that three sensations follow one another. First A, then B, then C. When this happens to you, you have the experience of passing through the process A, B, C. But note what this implies. It implies that there is something in you which stands sufficiently outside A to notice A passing away, and sufficiently outside B to notice B now beginning and coming to fill the place which A has vacated, and something which recognizes itself as the same through the transition from A to B and B to C, so it can say, I have had the experience A, B, C. Now this something is what I call consciousness or soul. Okay, I'm going to stop there. So what in the world is he getting at? There's an A, there's a B, there's a C. So C.S. Lewis is saying, imagine there is a sequence of events. A, B, C. And now I'm going to be more descriptive than C.S. Lewis was. A is a period of happiness in your life. It is a good time in your life. B is a down, dark time in your life. And then C is where the point in your life where you just start to get out of the darkness again. You, as a conscious being, as a self, can experience A, the good time. And you can say, I am personally experiencing this. You're aware of yourself, you're aware of who you are, and you're aware that these things are happening to you and it is a part of your story. But not only that, but then you're able to understand and notice the transition between the happy time and the dark time. You can notice your own personal timeline and see the story evolve. And then you can see as the darkness goes from B to C, you're coming out of the darkness and you can tell your story. You can tell a testimony, some people would say. You're able to create this timeline of self. You're able to tell your own personal story and understand it. You can use words like, I am experiencing this, and I feel this, and I see this. Now, where C.S. Lewis differentiates consciousness from sentience is really all about self. So you're experiencing this goodness, and you can say, I am experiencing goodness. Now let's take a higher being with a similar nervous system, such as a cow. A cow may be experiencing a good time. The pastures are all green. It rains the proper amount. It gets the nutrition that it needs. There's no predators coming after it. But the cow never says to itself, I am having a good time. No, the cow is just there. The cow has no sense of self. It has no sense of I. What C.S. Lewis is saying that we can meditate and look outside of ourselves. It's almost as if you can observe your life as if it was happening within an aquarium, a fishbowl. You can sit outside these events and contemplate them and think about them, chew on them, digest them, and have feelings about them. While a cow is simply experiencing and reacting to these situations. Yes, it is more complex than a clam, or an oyster, or an earthworm. Yet, it does not have the image of self. A cow does not reflect on its past. It does not reflect on its life. Whenever it goes from a good time to a bad time, it does not say, oh, my life is changing. I am feeling these ways about the way that my life is changing. It was so good and now it's bad. No, it is only in the exact moment experiencing those things and reacting to those things. The way that C.S. Lewis puts it is, this would mean that if you give such a creature 2 blows with a whip, there are indeed 2 pains, but there is no coordinating self which can recognize that I have had 2 pains. Even in the single pain, there is no self to say, I am in pain. For if it could distinguish itself from the sensation, the bed from the stream, sufficiently to say, I am in pain, it would also be able to connect the 2 sensations as its experience. And then he goes on to say that the proper way to describe an animal in pain is that pain is taking place within the animal, not the animal feels pain, because that would be relating our consciousness to an animal that is only sentient. So to make it as simple and to use as few words as possible, sentience is, yes, awareness and interacting with the world. It's definitely a higher mind, but where the line is drawn between sentience and consciousness is the development of self. Only humans have the development of self. We analyze our own lives. We discuss our own lives. We talk about event A and talk about how it changed into event B and eventually came back into event C. No other creature on earth is able to sit back and truly ponder and analyze self and improve self. Now, an argument against this would be, well, of course, animals react to these things. Whenever a dog is hit, It learns and it feels pain and it changes its behavior. But that is simply a response to stimuli and a behavioral change. The dog at no point is thinking, oh wow, I'm feeling this abusive thing and it is happening to me and my experience is so negative and so I will change the way I behave. No, it is simply a natural response to stimuli, much more simplified than something that would happen to a human. Whereas when a negative event happens to a human, oftentimes it leads us to evaluate our entire lives, think about ourselves, think about all these successions of events in order and wonder how we got to this point. But no other animal is sitting around thinking about self in that way. And as C.S. Lewis puts it, the way that humans really stand apart from the rest of the animal kingdom is that no other animal is able to organize these events that we are experiencing and turn it into a full experience, a full timeline, a full set of pictures and a timeline of what is the human experience. And so we discussed the difference between sentience and consciousness, and to pull it back into context, this was all meant to say that an animal wouldn't be justified in its earthly suffering because of eternal heaven, because an animal wouldn't realize that it was going from earthly turmoil to eternal heaven. In fact, it might as well not even be the same animal because it has no timeline of events in its mind. It doesn't experience heaven the way that we would, because at no point would the animal in heaven be thinking, wow, I remember what it was like on earth, and this is so much better than that. It has no succession of events. It has no coordinated experience to compare. Well, there you have it, the difference between sentience and consciousness. I hope that I didn't overcomplicate things. I hope that I was able to properly articulate and differentiate the difference between consciousness and sentience. And that was just one of the many discussions brought up in the problem of pain. Thank you guys so much for being here and watching this video. I appreciate every single one of your views. If you want to see more videos like this, more intellectual videos, more book reviews, more videos discussing words and ideas and other fun things like that, please subscribe to my channel. If you had a good time watching this video, smash that like button. It really means a lot to me. Help me out with the algorithm. And I just hope that you guys learned something today. I hope that I didn't just babble and trip over my own tongue, but I hope most of all that you have an absolutely wonderful day. Have a great day, guys.